Look at you.
Punch it. All right, we're back with another episode, but first the sponsors. Head over to www.johnbartoloshow.com. There's a long list of sponsors there. I want to thank a few now. I got to thank Microtech Knives. I appreciate them, the whole team there, Jason, Tony, everybody. Fantastic crew. I want to thank Right On Optics, Gallo Technologies, Blackwater Ammunition, Enforced Weapon Lights. Shout out to them. Rhino Metals for the tables and all the desks in the studio. They support us. Love those guys. Go check out Rhino. All the links are down below for all the sponsors. Remember to check them out. Appreciate that. And leave reviews. Do a terrible job asking for reviews. I gotta do better. Got a special guest today. This is exciting. She came in. She's the first guest since I was on death's door. We'll get to that. It's a conversation for another time, but appreciate it. So we have quite the personality. I'm excited to have her on. Going to get into a few things. We got the one and only Lisa King.
I feel so honored. Thank you, John.
Listen, I want to get into something with you.
Oh, no.
Listen. You've been on this scene forever. I want to dive right in because this is a hot topic right now, and I think it's perfect timing, actually, to have you on today. Does it shock you how the fighting scene has evolved now to where we have, this Tyson, Roy Jones Jr., we have these celebrity cards, if you call them, and upcoming, we have, the Mountain and another guy, we have all these like celebrity cards popping up. Is that something that surprises you at all and how you've seen the evolution of fighting go on? And what's your take on all that?
Not at all. I actually anticipated. I mean, you've got these people who have spent their whole lives being in there and got the action going and known for their fighting styles. They don't want to quit. You got age and you got life that catches up with you, but I mean, they're gonna milk it. They're gonna milk it as long as they can, and the fans want it. So why would they not?
It makes sense, right? On a certain level. Like, I guess we would call them what? Celebrity cards, right? Or nostalgia cards or legacy cards. And we see them from time to time in the UFC. We saw, the Matt Brown, Ben Saunders fight. We've seen them in Bellator. We've seen them kind of everywhere. I think it's Tom DeBlas is coming back for another fight.
You've seen Tito keep
hearing. Oh, fuck Christ. There's nothing wrong with them, but is it nostalgia that drives it, or is it a payday? What drives it, in your opinion?
Well, I think for them, I mean, people will often say, do you miss fighting? Do you miss getting in there? Of course. I mean, if that was such a huge part of your life, you will always miss it, no matter what your profession was. You're always going to want to be attached to it, a part of it. And there's probably many times they're seeing all these other fighters doing it, and they're like, I want to be in there. So they want to do it, and the fans, I think, still love them and see them 20 years before. You
think it's fun to call those, or is it sad?
Well, it's interesting. I had the opportunity to go commentate a fight where Riddick Bowe decided to try his hand in Muay Thai after retiring from boxing, 10, 15 years prior. And it was you see Riddick Bowe as the person with a gazillion knockouts and never getting down on, in any fight. He was always, just the top of his game. And then you see him in a different sport where, why would he transition? I don't know. And it's kind of sad. You're rooting for him.
Sad clown.
No, I'm not saying sad clown. It's just
in the clowns.
You just see them at their prime, and then you see them come back. I mean, there's ring rust in any of these sports, and so you see them when they haven't done it for forever, and then you're like, that's not the same person, but you're hoping. So I guess there's a level of hope.
Here's where I am on it. I love the idea of some of these YouTube pseudo celebrities jumping in because I think it brings money.
Right.
Right. And if it makes money, it makes sense. Right.
Sure.
We're talking about this off air. And I think that there's something to be said about that. So I'm okay with seeing like the Jake Pauls and the Logan Pauls, because that's what the kids want today. Right. Like, so that draws in a certain audience.
Sure.
And I think that the sport needs that. And I think anytime the sport can pull in money from these outside worlds, I think it's a good thing. I think, we all look at all the professional organizations as what they are. They're the professional organizations. I think some of these cards and some of these things that pop up, I would love to see them be embraced because I think it opens the door to some of these legacy matches and some of these nostalgia matches. You just hope that it doesn't turn into campiness.
Exactly.
That's, I think, where it deteriorates. And by campy, I mean you don't want to see it go from an exhibition, which could be a fun thing, to,
them having a stare-off for 5 rounds.
Or have it turn into like, I guess what I'm getting at is like Tyson versus a fucking shark or Godzilla. You don't want to
Tyson just
I know.
did
He
the
just
shark
did the
thing.
shark thing.
Yeah, it's already there.
I don't want to see it turn into like deteriorate into something. I think the base being an exhibition between Roy Jones and Tyson is good.
Right.
Down the card, could it deteriorate into something a little wacky? Sure. I think, you have to protect against that because then the integrity of it becomes like a circus. You know what I mean?
They used to do that on Tough Man, I think, back in the day, where you would just see people go in there and do an exhibition, and it was just, you didn't want to see it anymore.
Well, the early days of UFC were like that.
Yeah.
It was like Joe the bartender versus, it really was.
Tank Abbott.
Tank Abbott. I mean, Tank at least had knockout skills. There was skill there. Albeit, he was a one-trick pony, but there was at least some skill there. I think in the early, if you go back and watch 1, 2, and 3, it's kind of like having the ugly kid that we thought was good-looking. Like, we were like, our kid was so good-looking, but there was really, there was 3 or 4 highly skilled people, and the rest left a lot to debate. So it's going to be interesting. Do you think it's going to be a hit?
I actually do think that there's going to be a lot of people who tune in. It's like a train wreck. You can't stop and just
I'm gonna watch.
see. Of course, I want to watch. Mm-hmm. I'm excited to see it.
What would be, in your opinion, if it moves this way, which we think it's gonna? What would your opinion be of a dream card? What would you like to see?
Oh gosh.
I know. Like, do you want to see like a Ronda come back?
Yeah, of course. I would love to see Ronda back in her prime, and, Misha's doing all of her things and, is in Singapore right now, but, seeing all of them. But they've had their day, and now they're kind of moving on to their next generation. I wouldn't say that would be my dream card. We'd always love to see Gina back and do her thing. But again, it's hard when you've gone on and you still might train, but you're not training like you're getting ready for a fight. So I
have selfish wants.
Okay, what do you got?
A mixed singles match. I'd like to see like 2 female combatants, then 2 male. So like round 1, you get the females. Round 2, you get the male. You get and it's kind of goes like that. I think something like that would be interesting. We've seen that in jiu-jitsu tournaments and certain things. I think Vinny just did one with Nikki and some of the guys. I think mixed matches might be fun. I think even a female, like if you had Misha, Ronda, Kat, you had like a mixed, I don't know how you do it. I haven't thought it out, but I think it'd be fun.
I think they've tried, and commissions tend to think that might not be the best.
Yeah, it has to be unsanctioned.
It's on some underground stuff.
Yeah, but well, who sanctions these celebrity cards? Do you know? Is it still sanctioned by Nevada?
I'm sure it is. It has to be.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
it has to be.
Yeah, I know.
But there's no title.
No, there wouldn't be a title.
There's no title.
Yeah,
it's exhibition.
In theory.
Yeah.
Anytime someone says exhibition, they're still going for it.
Yeah,
who knows what the rules are, when you go in there for the rules meeting and the referee tells you what you can or cannot do. Maybe it'll be no more than X amount of punches, and then we're going to break you.
Yeah, 5 rounds or something. I don't even know tonight's. I don't. I haven't even ventured to guess. But it's going to be interesting how it plays out. But I think anytime you add the celebrity component, I think it opens the door to new money, new audience. Mm-hmm. I think you have to bring in some of these, for lack of better words, wannabes, the YouTubers. And I think that'll bring in that audience to see kind of how it plays out. There's no question, like the Logan and Jake Paul thing, it's a little hokey, but there is something there. They are trained. They are training. Are they on that level? It's $1 million question.
Right.
I say no, but we'll see. And we'll see how legit it is. But it'll be fun to watch. I'll tune in. And I think down the line, I think it does open the door to some of these legacy cards and some of these different things. But I wanted to get your take on it. And, I think I'll be tuning in. I know you will be.
1,000,000%.
Yeah. So I think what makes or breaks a card, though, is going to be that mid piece of the card and who's going to be on it. And, I think having Tyson and Roy Jones anchor it is a big thing, but who you have in the middle is what's going to make or break it and get people to tune in and, I'll check this out.
I think everybody's just going to tune in, I think, just for Tyson.
Oh, he's such a draw.
He really is. I mean, when you are retired and you haven't fought in that many years and still they're just going to tune in just for you. I don't even know if they put, if they don't have a card, people will still tune in.
Now, he's our generation. Does it shock you that he's such a draw?
No, not at all. I mean, I grew up and he was everything. So
King Kong.
Yeah, he was.
I mean, he was the fastest meteoric rise in our generation, our time frame. He was ferocious. He was terrifying. Did he ever win a big one? I'd argue Spinks was a big, no doubt. I'd argue that was a big one. I think it changed the face of fighting and the way he boxed, being an inside-out fighter, the way that he was with that vicious uppercut that no one...
He was just vicious in general. Everything that he did was, with bad intention. And
Has anyone come along since, even in MMA?
I was actually thinking about that. I would have to say Francis. No, you don't think? Oh, he's mean.
I would put Randy in there as a little bit like scary because I think Randy brought in the dirty boxing and there was some components and Randy just at any age you felt like he could drop somebody. I would say in terms of fear factor, no one was scarier than Tyson, but if I was to put somebody else that the minute he stepped in the ring, you were equally like, this dude's fucking horrifying, was Brock. Brock was right there. Brock was one of the few people I've ever met that I was like, this dude's terrifying. He's an absolutely terrifying human being.
He's a monster. He's an absolute monster.
So it's hard to say, but I don't think he had the mic chops Tyson had. I mean, it's hard to put. I mean, Tyson just fucking said whatever he wanted. I mean, he was awesome.
Well, I mean, yeah, that he's what gave the bad energy. Everybody grew to love that, which is he
made a fight
WWE. Yeah. And everybody else is so polite, and you got the martial artists that have so much respect. But I'm just going to say fight style. When you look at it and you're like, that man's got knockout power, I'm going to say Francis. That's my vote.
Yeah, no, listen, there's no doubt that Francis brings a component to it. But I think along the way there was a couple guys that showed flickers of it, but Tyson was the most ferocious. I mean, just the walk out to the ring alone fucking scared you. It scared me, and I was home, and I was safe. So... in all the years of training, I think, you look back and we all admire certain people's style and certain people's techniques and the way that people approach things. And Tyson's approach matched his mouth. It was kind of like everything.
Back it up.
Yeah. Everything was just so terrifying. Just the way he hit a bag. You looked at the training and you were like, wow.
I don't want to be hit with that.
So... It's interesting because it's our generation, and we always listen to our grandparents or our parents talk about their generation. When we look at ours, I put Tyson in a unique space in the Mount Rushmore, in terms of just what he was able to accomplish. But his fault was he made it look too easy along the way.
He did.
Roy Jones, now flip the script to Roy Jones. Roy Jones, to me, was the best pound-for-pound fighter of our lifetime, to me. But that's because of he was so talented in a 7-8 year span. He just beat everybody, and he did it so handily and in a way and in a style that just everybody, if you could emulate a style, be his. But Tyson's attitude was what everybody wanted, his meanness. And, it's going to be an interesting, I mean, obviously they've lost a step and all that jazz, but it's still going to be fun to watch. And they look in pretty good shape. I mean, I saw the weigh-in, and they looked all right. They're not Adonises, what they once were, but they both looked good, and it'd be interesting to see. I think they're signed on to do, 3 of these or something at least? There's a couple.
Yep.
They're not going to do one. It's going to be an exhibition, so they're going to have a couple of them. But
well, a trilogy would make sense financially.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it would be set up, but it would just...
And that's the next question. Is there money in it?
Of course.
For them? And what kind of money are we talking? Is it the promoters that are making the money? Are they promoting it? How does it work, Lisa, when it shakes out? I mean, in Europe, like you've seen this, you've been around this game. How do they put this together to have it make sense?
Well, I mean, obviously you got sponsors. Sponsors are everything. You got the viewership. They already have that. I mean, I know that the only reason Riddick was willing to do Muay Thai was for that payout. It was in
Right.
Thailand, and it was a huge check. And
Right.
so, sponsors must have come to the table because it was actually, I mean, they weren't going to make money in Thailand. It was the viewership. So it's anticipated viewership. So the promoters put it together, and I'm sure that they're asking for a pretty penny.
Are the promoters getting pushed out though? Is that a trend? Is it becoming more like Tyson's the promoter? Is it becoming more the fighters because they want to make, it's kind of like the music industry, right? Like I had the DJ Blau on and we were talking about that, and you have to be really smart with your deals now. And in the old days when, we were younger, they were getting creamed in some of those deals, and they were getting absolutely screwed. I mean, when you heard about the money that they were actually taking home, and we can get into the UFC and that, but people have to look at the modeling, and I think in these cards, they want to have the most control. And I know one of the hangups with Tyson doing the bare knuckles was he wanted so much up front because he was worried about the promotion being able to float it.
Right.
So that's always a concern. So when you put these together, really the mechanics of it are really important, right? How it plays out, we hope that the fighters make the lion's share of the money, obviously, always, right?
Right. They usually don't, unless, of course, you're Mayweather and McGregor or something along those lines. But yeah, I mean,
Do you think that hurts the sport when they don't?
I mean, the fighters are the ones getting the damage, and they should be making ample money, but just doesn't usually work that way. It is the promoters.
It is the promoters. It always tends to
It's a
be.
business.
Well, we'll see. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think, I hope that this is something that, Tyson's, for better or worse in his career and how you look at it, and Roy Jones, a lot of these guys have made a lot of money, and it's a matter now of their legacy and what they're trying to put together, and hopefully they get some steam out of it, and they get some heat. And that's what I think they're all trying to recapture more than the money is get that heat, get the eyeballs on, get the attention, and they're able to parlay it into their other businesses and the other things that they do. Because I know Tyson has the ranch and he's, doing that thing. And I think this is fun popcorn. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be fun popcorn. And I think hopefully they get the pay-per-view buys. Whether or not it'll be on the level of a McGregor or something on those lines is another story. But
that probably won't happen. But it's got to be up there.
It will. It'll be fun. And how it plays out, I think, we're going to see more of this. There's no doubt. But does it stay with pay-per-view forever? Does it eventually lead to Twitch or streaming or other avenues? Maybe other paywalls. I don't know. I know ESPN and ESPN Plus are clamoring to keep as much in-house as they can, and I know pay-per-view is trying to keep as much in building as they can, but how long before a fighter, they do a promotion and it's behind their own paywall? How long before that comes? I think it's around the corner. I think it's only a matter of time when someone figures it out and they figure out the way to do it and get it into every home, because that's where the real money is.
Sure.
When they can cut all of that out and go direct, and it's just at like lisaking.com.
Right.
Once it's there, game over.
Right.
Because then you're able to scoop every dollar.
Right.
So it'll be a game changer. In your wildest dreams, did you vision that this is how fighting would play out?
I would say in the 90s, no. In the 2000s, yes. I definitely, in the 90s, you saw the UFC getting going, and the controversy surrounding that. You had boxing, you had female boxers here and there, but not like it is today. Obviously, in the 2000s is when I was fighting, and I was doing Muay Thai, and there was, like you said, underground. There wasn't a whole plethora of us. There was handfuls of us, and we fought wherever we could. It wasn't for paydays; it was for fun. But we just knew it was going to evolve to this. I had done many of interviews. I did one with Time Magazine where I had said, I think it was probably 2004, 2005, and I said, mark my words, women will be in the UFC.
Yeah. And, Gina's arc is an interesting one to talk about with you because you're familiar with it and you've seen it. I mean, I love seeing how she's transitioned to The Mandalorian and just building a little, it's the right thing,
Sure.
Instead of doing, cheap cameos in movies where she plays the heavy, it's nice to see her actually doing something that I think is going to lead to a lot more doors opening for her, especially as she develops her acting craft and everything else, and she's actually, playing a role. And what better than in the Star Wars universe, because there's so much depth that can just be created by the actor or actress themselves to create that character and make it more. And I think that plays to her ability to ad lib and to, create. But I think I'd love to see more fighters, get away from, I'm going to open a gym and that's going to be the next step. Get into some of the spaces that I think that there's a lot of room to get into, because why not, if you're going to be an action star, make that transition? Mm-hmm. Arnold did it. Mm-hmm. Why not? And does it surprise you how few have?
I just think that I think a lot of them want to. I know Frank Trigg does a lot of stunts. Mm-hmm. He's been doing an amazing job over the
forever.
last 5-10 years, where you just see him in more and more things. And obviously Rhonda did some TV here and there, some movies. I'm surprised she actually didn't do more of it. But yeah, there's so many, I think, that are just really talented, really personable, and that they've got the arts behind them, that I think they could really do something big with this.
Was Rhonda a product of being such a specialist that it hurt her in the long run?
I think she played it well. I think she really played it well. She was so amazing at her craft. Like you said,
tremendous judo player.
Yeah, like you said with Tyson. Whether you liked Tyson or you didn't, you wanted to see what the results were. And Rhonda was the same thing. She was so cocky, but or I should say confident. She could back it up, and just like Tyson. So, obviously two totally different athletes, but kind of the same mentality, where she would just say what it was and usually be able to back it up until the end.
I mean, there was like a 3-year run where, I have the most respect when you look at someone and it's like, even if it's a short run, where they're unbeatable.
Right.
And there was like a 3-year run,
right,
Lisa, where she was unbeatable.
Yep.
I don't think anybody could have gotten in the ring and beat her. She just had that arm bar dialed in so tight. She could hit it.
So confident.
She could hit it from anywhere on the mat,
right,
and she could just drop anybody. I think the only person that had a shot at her was probably Kat. I have a friendship with Kat Zingano, but I think looking back, she was the only one that maybe could have been an Achilles heel for her. Mm-hmm. But because Kat beat 2 of the 3, couldn't get over Ronda. The Ronda fight didn't go her way, and the rest was history, and that kind of put it there. But I think Ronda was still at a time when women's MMA was still specialties.
Sure.
Everybody still had their specialty. And then Holly comes in, and she has a little bit of everything, mm-hmm, probably the boxing on the level of Ronda's judo, mm-hmm, and Ronda tried to beat her a little bit at her own game, and that became a danger. And I think we've seen this evolve in the men's game quicker, where you had to have the Muay Thai, you had to have the jiu-jitsu, you had to have the little bit of the judo, you had to have the takedown stuff, and now we see wrestling coming in as heavy as it is, and it's coming in hot and heavy right now. Mm-hmm. But we still see some wrestlers falter. We saw Ben Askren eat shit, against George. But it's interesting to see that evolution, and now you have Amanda, who's the complete package, and you have, who's ferocious. And you see there's other people out there that I'm still impressed by. I'd still love to see like a Zoila get back in it. I'd still love, mm-hmm, to see, there's certain people out there. I mean, I think Valentina's not done maybe taking a shot at the top mark. I think she's waiting in the weeds. She's going to have to get through. I think the Willie Zhang thing's going to be good for her, but there's so many out there, and there's still some, like I said, like on the sidelines, like Zoila, that are waiting in the weeds that could come out and whatever promotion they fight in still be dangerous and be great fighters. So I love the women's game, and I love how it's evolved and what it's become. But I think now we see the 3 that are really dominating their weight classes. Willie, seeing, Amanda and Valentina. I think those 3 are they the best we've ever seen?
Amanda, I am so, yeah.
I mean, it's hard,
yeah,
right?
It really is hard. But yeah, they're pretty awesome. And there's so many women who have, like you said, had a specialty and did their thing. But like you said, now everybody has to get good at everything. Yes, you need to be the whole package.
Yeah, I think right now we're looking at the 3 most complete women's fighters, if I'm being selfish, that we've seen in the fight game.
Yeah.
You know, and you can go across other promotions. Like I said, I still think that there's some out there that could be dangerous. It's just a matter of bringing them into the fold or whatever promotion or whatever crossover. But it's fun to watch, and the women's game is at a really fun freaking place right now. It really is. That Willie Zhang is amazing. I mean, she's built like a fucking tree.
Yep.
I mean, what is she, 115? She's 115.
Tiny, but she's extremely skilled. So yeah, no, I love watching. I've always loved what the women, and that's why I said in the 2000s, and I'm like, just wait, we're finally getting a chance to showcase our skills, and like you just said, even a 115, you're going to see people go in there and not wait. They're not hesitating. They're not feeling things out. They're going to go in there and prove themselves, and they know that they have to.
Now, I asked Valentina this, and I asked her sister this, Antonina, and I've asked some of the other women I've had on, Jessie Jess, all of them, Jessica I. There's something about the women the day after the fight. They love posting their battle scars.
War wounds, of course.
Why do you think that is? What's the psychological to that? Like, I'm a woman, hear me roar, or what's the element to that?
No, I know back in our day, we used to love it. You'd get done with a good day of training, and you're just dead to the world, and you see these things developing. You're like, that's really cool. Oh my God, you got me. And there's nothing better than a good war wound. I remember having a black eye for about 5 weeks, and I took pictures every way I could with statues. It was like having a gnome. I was like, look at this.
There's something psychological to it, though. It's like, I'm a woman and I can take a beat and fuck you. Like, it's kind of, don't tell me. There's something about that. I know that there's an element of that to it, because you see the pictures. Like, I remember, was it Rose Namajunas one time posted a picture, and she had like 2 black eyes, a busted nose and lip. And it's just like, had a fight last night. So what?
Well, I think that there's a perception of what you are, females are supposed to look like, and it's completely the opposite. Back in my day when Fight Girls was around, there was a podcast.
Fight Girls, yeah.
So Frank Trigg was on a radio show, and I used to go on there and talk, recap the week on Fight Girls, and he would just say, I have all the respect in the world. I don't want to see a female get their ass kicked. Like, not cool. Not cool at all. And we used to debate it till we were blue in the face. So I guess it was almost the shock value of, look, I'm all jacked up, and, I could still get girled up, at the drop of a dime. I don't know. It's just kind of fun. It was a shock value. I would be at restaurants and people would be like, oh my God, what happened?
You don't see the men do it. That's the funny part.
You're a different beast. You're a different beast. We could be frilly and pretty, or
when we're hurt, we're like, don't take pity on us.
I know. You get a cold and you're down for a month.
We're down. Fuck.
But we still get to go about our life. And yeah, I think they're cool. I love the word.
I love it. I think it's great. And I try to get to the psychosis of it. Like, what's the reasoning? And like, all the girls just kind of smile. And like, even Antonina's like, it's just, like
it's in our handbook. We're not allowed to share it. How about that?
Yeah, it's in the bag.
Yeah.
It's in that bag.
If you can figure that out, you can probably figure out everything.
Magical powers are in those handbags.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that's always been fun and intriguing to me, is watching that women's game evolve, and even how they portray themselves. But I think it's a little bit of like, I'm a woman, I can take a beating, and you know what? Fuck you. And I think that's cool. I think it's unique to that side of the sport. You don't see a lot of men do it. I think,
John Wayne Parr goes on after every fight with his 19 million staples, saying, okay, look at this. So he loves his war wounds.
Does it surprise you that, I know we're going to always have UFC, and to an extent Bellator, and we're going to have these other promotions. Do you get surprised at all the ones that pop up that are trying to make, like the bare knuckles? Is any of that's kind of like, what are we doing here? Is any of them a bridge too far?
No, bare knuckles been around in Thailand for all eternity. So I know, back in the day, again, I was fighting in the early 2000s. It was one of those things that all of our fighters came from Master Tati's camp. All of our fighters would go over there and do bare knuckle and come home. And, it was just for the experience. They were not making money. There was not a lot of money in Muay Thai. They just did it for the fun. Can I do it? Let's try some new rules out. And it was as close to us as UFC was, because you had no gloves. I know I wanted to do it. My sports agent at the time said, "You've lost your mind."
Yeah, I wouldn't advise that.
Yeah, no, he's like, no, you have a job, you have a life, you know, let's keep the face somewhat intact. But to me, it was just not any different than what we were doing, and I wanted to see how I fared, but never came to fruition.
Was it hard for you to transition to the mic mentally?
Two different perspectives. So to commentate, no, because I could just talk about what I'm seeing and what I love. When I started ring announcing, I got pushed into ring announcing, and that was not something on my wish list of things to do. And I would have different promoters come and say, "I want a female." You know, it was a specialty act.
Yeah.
I want a female ring announcer, and I'm like, "No, I'm good. Why don't you call, John Doe over there? He's been doing it for 500 years." They're like, "No, we want a female." So I kind of got pushed into that, and it was just one of those things that it was a little bit scarier for me, if you will, just to know that at the end of the day, if anything comes up, you now have to run the room, and it was a little bit different. So the commentating I loved.
Yeah, I ask because you see guys like Chiesa starting to make a move towards the booth, and I think it's smart for some guys. They start to transition in gals into that, and I always wonder, psychologically, is it hard to put it down? Is there a moment where you put it down and you say, this is my path? I think back in even bodybuilding, right? An interesting story. The gentleman who does the announcing for Mr. Olympia contest, Bob Ciccarello, he got invited to Olympia, and he turned it down because it was the first year he got offered to host it. So he said, I can host for the next 50 years, or I can compete in Olympia once and maybe finish top 10. But it's a life decision. Sure. So people always look back and say, should I have done this or should I have done that? Should I have stuck with this? I think it's hard to sometimes put something down and pick something up. I transitioned out of being an executive in the firearms business to doing podcasting and different things. I still do some consulting on the side, but there really isn't a lot of worlds for me to conquer left in that world. It wasn't like, if Smith & Wesson or SIG called, of course you take that call. But, I reached a point where I'm like, well, what am I going to go do? Run another gun company? So you kind of reach a point, right? There's like an aha moment where it's like, I like this. I can do this. I enjoy it. And you've had tremendous opportunities come out of it. You got a cameo in The Kingdom, right? It was on Netflix. And I think that's a testament to who you are and what you've built and the brand that you've built. And I think that tells people that there is something beyond just fighting, right?
There definitely is. And, I kind of had a unique start in the fact that I did not want to fight. I kind of got pushed into that too. I loved that I was pushed into it, but I was commentating before I started fighting. So I kind of bounced back and forth. And I got great opportunities by never saying no to an opportunity that, presented itself.
Is that the secret?
I think it's my secret. It's worked for me.
Yeah, because Chiesa's doing the bounce now. He's kind of between both, and I've had Mike in here, and we were talking about it, and he loves doing the ringside stuff, and I'm like, just fucking go with that, dude. Like, you don't have to get your head pounded in.
Well, and people used to say that. They're like, you don't have to do this. I'm like, I'm not doing it because someone forced me to do it. I'm doing it because I love it. I loved each aspect. It was kind of a different portion of me.
And then Paul just came out of the booth to fight, which he put on a great show. I was impressed. I was like, wow, he went the distance, went to a decision. And I think that's always there, not saying that's the path for every person, but, he got the call on short notice and was like, yeah, I'll do this. And I think that those opportunities kind of present themselves for some guys and some gals and they're huge. But I think the transition is always the hard part, knowing that I'm going to put this down to pick that up. But the secret to being successful and staying in the game is the longevity. And I think you're right. I think saying yes more than saying no is tremendously important.
Yeah, it goes with the theory of being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Who I watch do that often, and like you said, being multidimensional, Joe Stevenson. So you've got a fighter who has a great track record as far as a fighter. He's got a great track record as a coach. He's also a stunt coordinator, so he's stunt coordinator for Kingdom. And then also, he's a phenomenal commentator. I mean, there's kind of nothing Joe can't do. And just when you think he's done with one, he bounces back into it. So he stays connected to everything. And it's just even watching him fight, you never get to the point where you're just like, hey, Joe, it's time to give it up. You know, he still has it all. So there are so many opportunities.
I think that's a stylistic component. I think if you fight with a certain style, you might outlive your shelf life, so to speak. You know, if speed's your game and speeds begins to diminish, it gets harder to stay in the game. If power's your game and power begins to diminish, that becomes difficult. You know, as we get older, obviously, you lose a step, you lose certain skills. You know, the thing I always think about is I think these promotions, I think the next evolution for these promotions, and I want to get your thoughts on it, is to really help these fighters transition. I think that's the biggest.
There should be a life coach somehow, somewhere, telling them. I have actually said that for years, you know.
What would you see a perfect, you know, system? Because I don't know it.
Well, I mean,
do they need a therapist?
No. I mean, we probably all do. If we got into fighting for fun, we probably all need a therapist.
For money.
There's something, you know, there's something a little off. Doesn't mean it's wrong. But I would have to say that, as with any sport, whether it's football or anything else, you need a person in there guiding you. And your sports agent should do it. But I don't think everybody's got
I don't think,
agent.
I don't think, and Jason House is supposed to be on, but I don't think he's coming on, but I don't think the agent market is developed in the fight game to that point. And that's not a knock to them. I just think that that's not there. Like I know in the NFL, they have rookie camps and they have, you know, Herm Edwards was known for years for working with a lot of the rookies and developing them to educate them and teach them the pitfalls. I would like to see, you know, just because I've gotten to know so many through the years, through training, I'd like to see someone step in. And I thought, again, he can't wear 5,000 hats. Like Forrest is kind of that way, but like you would think that there would be someone that could grab them like and say, hey, you know, what do you want to do after this?
Sure.
You want to open a gym, like a transition team that can kind of help them. Okay, we can help you with leases. We can have very practical stuff because I feel like the practical stuff gets lost.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like, what now? What do I do now?
Well, I mean, it's like what we say with kids in high school. There should be a person in there just gearing them up for the things in life that they need to get ready for.
Guidance counselor. Yeah.
Or that. You know, but the same thing I think for fighters, because I have had many conversations with fighters that, you know, are 40, 42, and you're just like, what are you doing? What's the next step? Oh, I got another 5 years. Do you? Do you really? For who?
Well, I think at that stage, well, it's a question for you.
Sure.
At what stage of the game do you have to start thinking about the next step? And what advice would you give anyone thinking, like if it's the thoughts starting to cross their mind, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think for anybody who's getting into it, you should always have some sort of end game. I mean, you don't know what's going to develop throughout that time. I mean, I didn't know it was going to plan B. There should always be a plan B. I mean, anybody can get hurt. You could tear an ACL or be out for 6 months or a year or something along those lines. But what do you want to do? What do you want your legacy to do? I would be having those life coaching moments with someone and, you know, asking them, you know, God forbid you get hurt. What's the next step? What are you going to do? How are you going to feed your family? What's the game plan? Because there's a lot of them, a lot of people that are just like, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I get two types in here. In the 325 episodes I've done, and probably 100 of them with fighters, I get the types that come in and they want to talk about real estate. They want to talk about everything outside of the ring, which is great, which is so refreshing. And then you get the types that they're like, everything's the next fight. And you're just like, what do you mean? Like, what? Like, you kind of like, what else? Like, what else you got going on? Oh, well, you know, I'm going to do a camp. And I get when you're 25, that makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense, and that's a great thing for you to be focused on.
Yeah,
but when you're 35, there better be a plan B in place.
To everybody out there, what percentage of fighters actually make money in the sport? You've been around a lot. And we talk about this in the shooting world. Sure. Like, what percentage, is it below 10% that are actually, they can make a living fighting, in your opinion?
Yeah, I would say maybe the top 15% are making money and they're doing well, and they should have enough to stash away if they've got a financial planner.
Sobering.
Yeah, but you know, what how many, I guess, would you say have that setup that, are planning for, the next chapter?
Well, George was a great example, Masvidal. He was a journeyman, and then he caught absolute fire, liquid flames the last 18 months, 2 years since the Ben Askren fight. And we've seen him now play it very smart. He's got a lot of good people around him. He's got Monster. He's got Hans. He's got some people getting involved with him that, they're kind of, he did the Usman thing, which didn't even put a chink in his armor last minute. And when you do those last minute fights, I had Eric Anders in here and we were talking about it. And Eric was like, when you do those last minute fights, sometimes they're lucrative, and you have to look for those opportunities, when you can grab them. And right now, because they're trying to fill up so much content all the promotions are trying to get their promotion out there. That's the opportunity to make cash. But you sometimes worry and wonder, you aware of what you're getting into and how many people actually can make a living in it. Now, you can make the other argument that it doesn't matter the profession you go in. You can look at any profession. How many are actually making six figures doing it? We joke in the shooting world all the time. There's a lot of professional shooters out there. I had 3 of the best in the world in here a couple weeks ago. Doug Koning, JJ Racaza, Max Michel, and they'll all tell you, they're like, it's 3 of them are probably sitting in the room right now that actually make a living shooting a gun. It's a very small percentage when you really look at it, but a lot of people want to jump on the bandwagon and feed that meter. For every guy or gal making 6 figures, there's 100 making nothing.
Well, I just call it, the struggling artist. I mean, everybody at the gym was, you want to be the next fighter. You want to be the next discovered. And I'm not going to say it's a lotto, but you got to hope that you're in the right place to be recognized, to make it to that card, especially, back in the day. But now everybody's a fighter. Their pool is so big. You better really make your mark in order to get to that top tier.
Have you ever been in the tough spot of advising someone and saying like,
I wouldn't say it's a tough spot. I'm pretty honest and,
painfully, yeah.
Straightforward and, just I love doing post-fight interviews because I want to hear everybody's backstory. And I kind of have more of a motherly approach to some of these fighters where I'm just like, okay, so what's next? And how are you going to do this? And no, you should maybe think about X, Y, and Z. And sometimes they want to hear it. Sometimes they don't. I don't throw myself into that conversation all the time, but sometimes I think it's necessary when I'm just like, who's helping you make these decisions? Because I don't think those are good decisions.
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard one. I mean, a lot of times, I train at 10th Planet, so I sit around with a lot of the young, and I see some of the under 25s. Everybody's like, I'm gonna be there, and I'm sitting there, and I'm 40. I'm like, okay, yeah, all right. But you don't want to discourage. It's a fine line between discouraging and giving advice and guiding and just making people aware of the realities. And if you are going to pursue anything, I don't care if you want to be a stockbroker or whatever it is, you try to give people advice, and that's based on the experiences and like a lot of people say, I want to do what you do, John. I want to just put on a microphone every day. And I'm like, took 15 years to get to this point where there's a studio and there's lights and there's camera people, and it doesn't happen overnight. It's not something that just, appears. I'm like, this is a byproduct of being, in the mix for so long that I transitioned to this, and it made a lot of sense for me at the time. I like to talk, so I fucking put a microphone in front of my face, and I'd like to talk to a lot of people. But I think the reality with a lot of these folks and people that get into the fight game, and you've been around and seen it all, there's just so much that goes into it, and you never want to, I guess, say to someone, you should do this or you should do that. I think it's just more go into it with open eyes and a clear conscience and understand that if it goes well, this is how it's going to go. If it goes bad, this is what could happen.
Well, and often, I'll get people who will come to me and be like, hey, if you know any promoters, let them know I want to be on the card. And I'm like, okay, well, here is a list of promoters. You should reach out to them on social media or this, that, whatever. Well, can you go talk to them? And I'm like, look, you got to promote yourself. Mm-hmm. I would love to.
Glad you brought this up.
But you need to put yourself out there and you need to be aggressive. That,
hustle game.
It's such a hustle. It's like anything else. And I'll do the same thing. People will be like, well, how do I get to be able to commentate? And I'm like, you're going to do a lot of free stuff for a really long time.
That's a big one, Lisa. That's a big one people don't realize. I'm glad you just touched on that. that's one thing that goes, like when I started this show, I try to tell people I started this in my kitchen as a joke. Like I was like, I'll do a podcast. People had said do one. I had done one with Shooting USA, and then I transitioned to this. And I said, I'm just going to put a mic on and see where it goes. And people don't realize, and Bruce from Quest Nutrition used to say this, if you want to be successful or work very closely with a brand, you have to be prepared to give 6 months of your life at least to that brand and be dedicated. And prove
yourself.
And he said it right on the microphone. He goes, if anybody wants to follow me around, pack a bag, come to one of the shows and find me.
Right.
And you'll find me handing out Quest bars or Legendary food or dog food or any Valiant dog food, whatever he's pumping or pushing, BLK water or whatever. And you have to be willing to give till it hurts. To the point where when you ask for money or you ask for benefits, they're like, okay, this person's an asset and there's a value add. Because in a lot of these industries, whether it's firearms, MMA, this is a great place to work. I don't dissuade anybody from it. They're phenomenal industries. The defense industries are phenomenal, and they're so much fun, and you're around so many great people like yourself and so many other guests that I've had on. But the reality is, everybody who's got to this point has given so much. You've probably given $100,000 plus of your time just to get where you are. And now you still probably feel like I just got a foot in, like it's about making that crack in the door a little bit more, but you have to be willing to give to get. And that's the hardest thing for people to understand. Bruce has done open invitations on this mic. Come on, follow me. That's $1 billion brand, and no one ever shows up.
Well, they'll say that. I mean, I volunteer for a lot of nonprofits, and, I'm doing podcasts for them, and, I'm doing interviews for them and TV shows, and people are like, I just want to do what you do. And I'm like, you do realize I am volunteering my time. Every time you see me do that, I'm not getting paid. And they're like, well, but I've got this service. Maybe they can hire me. I'm like, it's nonprofit. Like, get yourself out there, get yourself known, and, make yourself valuable.
Now, these are all valuable pieces of advice. It's rare that anybody comes along and actually takes them and runs with them. That's a whole nother story. That's another podcast. But it's so true. And I wish that, if people listening could take one thing away, is understand that you have to give until it hurts. And I get frustrated, and people have seen my rants on LinkedIn and certain places. Like, everybody today wants it all right now. They want it now. And I'm the first to say, like, why are you soliciting, which is essentially what it is, whether you want to be on a card or you want to be in front of a microphone or you want to be an announcer or you want to have this life, right? First, give until you feel like you cannot give anymore and you earned the right to have that conversation. Give to the nonprofits. Get your face out there. Practice.
I was going to say, without that practice, you wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, people will say, don't you get really, really nervous before a fight anymore? And I'm like, I get really excited.
There's no time to be nervous.
And yeah, it's a hot mess. I mean, there's a million things that are going to go wrong, but I've already worked out a ton of kinks, not all kinks, but a ton of kinks for all those 5 million other shows that I've done, practicing. And it let me figure out if I really wanted to do it or not.
It's like when people ask me about the show, they'll say, what are we going to talk about? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just going to throw the mic on. It's like I'm at the point where I've done 300 of these. I'm like, it's just a conversation, and you try to tell people, but I've got to the point where I know I can feel the guest and I can guide the conversation. It wasn't always like that. It takes time. I do it with little to no notes, and I prefer it that way because I like to learn from the guest. And a lot of times one of my only quirks is I don't like to talk to the guest before a show because I like to dive right in and kind of learn as they go. But I like to have a conversation about what's current. It's not, people hit me up all the time. They're like, we want to talk about this product or this. I'm like, well, this ain't that show. Like, it's not that kind of party. There'll be plenty of time to plug stuff, but it's not that kind of deal. And I think you work that out through understanding, one, the market, what people want to hear, what people understand about a person and what they want to learn. And I'm here to tell people's story about their journey through self-defense, the defense industry, the things that they've experienced in life, what they see out there, current events, and how it's shaped them and brought them into this unique industry, because not everybody wants to be in an industry that either blows shit up, shoots shit, or beats people up. It's not for everybody.
It's pretty beautiful, though. It's a beautiful life.
It is, and it takes a certain, it's always a little tougher for females because it takes a certain kind of female to, when guys hear what you do, they're always like, what? You're around these animals all day, so it takes a certain kind of strength and a certain kind of person to be with a person that's involved in these businesses because they're not for the faint of heart.
No, it's unique. I would have to say I've gotten more grief from people just not understanding, why would you do that and why would you want to be a part of it? And, when are you going to get out of it? Are you kidding me? I purposely put myself in there.
Yeah. What do you want me to do? Go in a cube? What do you want me to do? Do accounting? Do long division? Yeah. Fuck that. Yeah. It's not.
I don't see either one of us in a cube doing long division.
No, I'm done working for people. It would take. There's only a handful of people that are left on that list
really?
that I would work for. Yeah, this is a very small handful. They know who they are too.
I was going to say, is this the time for you to say who those people are?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some brands and some companies. It's not a mystery. Like 6 hours home from me in Epping, New Hampshire, and in Newington. That's obviously the mecca of firearms industry. I grew up going there. Tom Taylor's a good friend of mine. I consider him a good friend. Hannah over there, Jason Wright. They're all phenomenal people, and that's one space. There are some intriguing brands like Remington just got bought out. That would be an interesting scenario. Smith & Wesson's always, Smith & Wesson, that's home, that's Springfield, Mass. So anything that's like, I'm a New England guy through and through. Mm-hmm. So anything that's home is always going to pull on a heartstring. There are some brands I love like Volquartsen. Scott Volquartsen. They're up in Idaho. They make 22 rim fires. They got a phenomenal crew. He really specializes in certain stuff. But there's two types of owners. There's owners that assume everybody in the room is smarter than them until proven otherwise.
Okay.
That's the best. And then there's owners that want to micromanage and squeeze everything to death.
It's painful.
And it's painful. Super painful. And,
I've done that once or twice in my life.
And when you work for those types of owners, they're the worst. Whether they're owners or CEOs, because there's no creativity. It's choked off at the jugular. So I am more interested in people that are willing to listen, and I'm a progressive in the media space. So I came up through marketing, comms, similar areas as you, and at a young age was a CEO and twice, and then I had a lot of tremendous opportunities, but my list became smaller and smaller because it was more the people that I wanted to work for or with. That kind of shaped my decisions, and that was always something that I neglected early on because I was just like, I want to go. Chasing the check.
Yeah.
100%. And we've all done that.
We've all done it.
Dancing
you have to
for dollars.
Learn the hard way that is not where it's at. I mean, you do it for a certain amount of time, and then you're like, I just sold my soul, and I'm not doing it.
We talk about this a lot. We talk about this. She knows. But you reach a point where, like, when companies ask me, well, how much do you want? I'm like, it's not about the money. You know what I mean? I'm like, the money will take care of itself. Yes, there's a number, depending on what you want me to do, but I'm more looking for this, and this.
And tell me about the culture.
Yeah, and tell me about the culture. But it takes time, and that's a maturity thing. It had to be beaten into me. I failed a lot to get to that place. And I've worked for some really shitty owners that showed me the light in that, it's like, but there are those two types of owners. That's it. There's only those two. You want to always work for the one, because you take somebody like Warren Buffett, right? Mm-hmm. He's a very, he says his famous thing is he writes a letter to all his CEOs every year about what he thinks about the company and this and that. And he lets them run the company. That's a guy who assumes everybody in the room is smarter than him until proven otherwise. You apply that same methodology to how somebody cuts your grass. Mm-hmm. You hire someone to cut your grass. They don't cut it, you fire them.
Right.
It's a very clinical black and white approach. And if more owners took that approach and more promotions and more, things would kind of take care of themselves. Hire people to do a job, let them do the job, give them all the resources they need, and let them fail or let them succeed. And
it's a novel concept.
It's a novel concept, but very difficult to implement.
Right.
Especially by owners. Owners are a fucking weird breed, especially in the firearms game, because it's an old school game. Very old school.
I could see nothing more fitting for a person such as yourself.
Yeah, it's an interesting game, but listen, we digress. you know, I don't claim to understand everything about the fight game, but you're hands down a legend in the game. Everybody speaks very highly of you and your arc. And a little like me, you've been behind the scenes in front of the camera. You've done a little of everything. And that, I think, speaks to volumes about what you know and what you don't know in the inside baseball. Along the way, I have to ask you this. Who's the best to never win one in MMA?
Who's the best to never win one?
That you've seen come along that you're like,
no, I understand the question.
This person got it, but they never quite ascended to where.
I can't think of anything on the top of my head. I can think Muay Thai. I mean, Muay Thai is my love, my first love. There's so many fighters, and it wouldn't even be a name that you know. You just see.
No,
so
I
many
know.
people.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. So you see, there's so many people that are amazing in the gym, but aren't about like you and I.
Like, what's the missing ingredient? You know, like where you're like, geez, this person has it, but they're just missing. One component.
Well, and I think it's, there's so many people who will let it get inside their head. And I've seen it where I'm thinking of one girl right now, Patty, I love you. She dominated in the gym. She would probably fight at 105 but would fight 135 or 145. And she would dominate everybody in the gym. You knew style wise, she was it. And back in the K1 days, like she should have been all over that. But she just didn't like a crowd. It was just one of those things where that wasn't her thing. Whereas a person like you and I are going to probably fight 10 times harder because of the crowd, because we do like the crowd. So I wouldn't say that there's one person that I can think of in MMA, but I could tell you that there's a lot of people I've seen that have that talent that just can't.
They're missing one key.
It's when they're so inside their head, and more concerned with what's going on around them than what they're able to do.
Yeah, I mean, the X factor I find more often than not is, and listen, you can get into names of people like Uriah comes to mind, obviously not winning in the UFC. Now probably Joey B took that title as probably the best to not get over, but everybody loves him. So, it's like there's certain people that do come to mind, but there's so many that die off in the gym.
Yep.
Is what you're getting at.
1,000,000%.
And that's the key thing.
It's the talent is so there. And I mean, so I commentate for California Fight League, which is a smaller organization in Victorville. And I would say that town has some of the most talented fighters in the world, possibly, and they all give me grief for saying it. There's not a whole lot to do in Victorville. So everybody out there is a fighter, but the talent is top notch. And even for boxing, I'm trying to think of the area of California. I would go Oxnard. Oxnard had some ridiculous boxers. I would commentate with Boom Boom Mancini and doing post-fight interviews, and everybody out there was amazing. But maybe they just didn't have the right people gearing them in the right direction, like we talked about a little bit ago. They never got to get to that
one
level.
Ingredient.
Yep.
That one ingredient, because we know what makes it. We see the diligence in champions. When you come across a champion, you just see a certain approach they have an approach towards doing the fucking dishes.
Right.
And it's, and champions all have that same quality. I always used to say when I was in charge of the companies, my way is the best way till you show me a better way. You can comment and you can say whatever you want in the boardroom, but my way is the best way till you show me a better way. And I think that in most successful people, they know what to do. They need very little coaching. They need people just maybe to keep them on the bumpers just a little bit and kind of guide them. But I mean, it's little tweaks here, it's little touches there. But when you sit with a Valentina or you sit with some of these people, they're very dialed in.
They got it.
Yep. They're very dialed in. They don't allow any distractions. There's nothing, no outside force is fucking with them.
But it could be the gym. I mean, if you go to, New Mexico, you see all the fighters, Holly Holm and Michelle Watterson and everybody else. You've got a different camp with a different mentality. Everybody's in it to win it, period, and without exception.
Who wants to live there?
That's what I'm saying, though.
That's the worst.
But if you've got some of these other places that don't have leadership like that, whether it's a boardroom or a fight situation, and you just don't have that type of leader that's instilling that type of training in their fighters, they might not get to that level. So that's another reason why you need to choose your camp, your coach, and the teammates quite wisely, because that could be the difference.
The coaching in the agents is still a little barbaric. It's still a little bit in the stone ages. It's evolving. It's changing. There's good people coming in, and there's great coaches, but there's still not enough in it to draw in, like you look at other sports like a Tom Brady. He's got like 4 or 5 lawyers. He's got top-notch people around him handling. Because why? Because the money's there. Sure. And there's that ability for him to have other businesses and other things. And he's a unique animal. I'm picking the best of the best. But I think as more money comes in and there's the ability to upscale your game and put better people around you, better mental coaches, but now you still see guys, they're grabbing coaches off the scrap heap like, hey, come corner me, or hey, come do So it's hard because it's a little bit of the Jerry Maguire mentality. It's like one person has 50 people and they can only give so much attention to certain areas, and it's very hard to do that. And it's very hard to, even in business, to eventually say, I need to hire this employee as a full-time person. I need to have this as a full-time thing. That's a very conscious adult decision, and it's not easy to do. To be able to bring someone into the fold and say, I need dedicated attention and I need dedicated this and dedicated that, because it costs money, and the money in the sport is limited to the top tier, like we said. So it makes it difficult to get that type of attention focused on you. But there's so many, as you said, that I like to use like the analogy like die off in the gym, that have a lot of the key ingredients. They're sniffing, they're scratching, they're there, but they're missing maybe one element, whatever that element may be, that gets them over. And that's kind of what, you always looking back and you say, geez, but that person was so good, or this person was so talented.
Well, it's just so painful because you just don't have that push. And again, I think that the average fighter is going to be like, okay, I want to be a fighter. I'm going to make a conscious decision, hire a sports agent. No, absolutely not. That's probably 0%, when you're first starting out. But you do want to surround yourself with the right team, because that becomes your fight family, and you want to make sure that they are, feeding you good info and good direction.
And I say it all the time, I'd rather be lucky than good, Lisa.
Yeah.
Sometimes luck plays a factor.
Exactly.
You got to have the ball bounce your way.
Yep.
Let everybody know where they can find you. Plug everything you got going on, all your stuff.
Well, as far as social media, you can find me on Instagram at _BlackWidow10.
We'll put that down below.
All right. And then we've also got, obviously, I'm on Facebook, and in a professional realm, you can find me on LinkedIn. My website is theblackwidow.us. Again, that's theblackwidow.us, and I'm not too hard to find.
Any anything coming up?
With COVID,
I know.
not so much. Who knows? Things pop up at the drop of a dime. But right now, not a lot of anything. I'm staying put like the rest of the world.
Well, listen, this was amazing. I had an awesome time with you. I can't thank you enough for coming in. Believe it or not, it's been an hour and 10 minutes. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything that you've done for the sport as a female. And, I think you're one of the unsung heroes in the game. I really do.
You
I really
are
do.
So sweet, John.
Listen,
I appreciate
it. And hopefully we'll look forward to maybe getting you back after something, maybe after this Roy Jones deal.
That would be amazing. I can't wait.
So I look forward to watching that tonight. And thank all the sponsors. Head over to www.johnbartoloshow.com. Go check out all the sponsors. They're all listed there. I want to thank Full Courts and Firearms. I want to thank Blackwater Ammunition, Rhino Metals, Gallo Technologies, Enforce Weapon Lights, Microtech, and everybody listed down below. I appreciate everyone. Right On Optics, I mentioned them, and Kenzie's. I appreciate everybody, and I think we're good. We're out.